Aloha and welcome to Connection to the Cosmos with your host, me, Dr. Lisa Thompson, where I have out of this world conversations with extraordinary people. And today I am so excited to have on my guest, Alena Gourley. We're going to bring her on in just a moment, and she's been a guest before on the show, but she's got a new book. I'm so excited to talk to her about the book. But first, a couple of announcements. So, if you have not had the opportunity yet to grab my free 20-minute meditative journey to meet your galactic family and guides, make sure you do that on my website, mysticmanta.com or drlisajthompson.com. Also, I will be hosting my next galactic retreat here on the Big Island of Hawaii, April 30th to May 4th, where we're going to have 5 full days of deep connection with our galactics. So if that sounds like something that you want to do, then make sure you sign up. Spaces are limited, and information on that is also on the Mystic Manta website. And then if you're coming to Hawaii, specifically to the Big Island, Kona side, then come on one of my Big Island UFO tours where you will see the night sky in a whole new way using the Generation 3 military night vision goggles. And information about that is at bigislandufotours.com. So without further ado, bringing on Alena. Hello.
Hello. I got
So
the
great.
chills when you were talking about your retreat and UFO tour, and I was like, crap, I know I need to go there.
Yeah. Well, so you have been a guest on the show before, but for
Yes.
those who missed that episode, because that was a couple years ago, actually,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to read your bio and then ask you that first question. So,
Okay.
okay, Alena Gourley of Celebrate Every Step is a licensed social worker, clinical hypnotherapist, past life regressionist, NGH certified instructor of hypnosis, psychic, medium, human design reader, and spiritual guide. She is the author of Blessed by Death: My Grief Journey from Pain and Sadness to Peace and Sacredness, which is coming out in a week and it's going to be a bestseller.
Yes. Yes.
Specializing in hypnotic healing and past life regression, she customizes each session to your beliefs and needs. Well,
Yes.
so before we get into the book, because we have so much to talk about that, I
Yes.
would love for you to share with the audience kind of how you grew up, spiritual, religious, something else, because I mean, I know your story and
Mm-hmm.
it's very interesting how you got to where you are.
Yes. So I did have a very interesting upbringing, was raised Catholic, and that was both sides of the family, and that included Catholic school from kindergarten to 12th grade. So it was very much our existence. We went to church every Sunday and all of that good stuff, and I get into it in the book a little bit deeper with how that happened with my grandparents and all of that good stuff too. But I always I had issues with it from as far back as I can remember, where just saw the world differently. I liked all the pomp and circumstance, the incense and the candles and all of those kinds of things, and I love the Catholic music, but the piece where Catholic was right, everybody else was wrong, was really hard for me to swallow. And that was something that I always questioned, which was obviously not great when that is kind of your whole existence. But I was kind of lucky in the way that my dad's mom, my grandmother, was very open. So she had had several near death experiences where she actually crossed over and came back. And then she also believed in past lives. She talked about a waking past life experience that she had in San Francisco. And she went to tea leaf readers. And now, looking back from where I am today, I really think that she had, my aunt called it second sight, where she was probably a little bit psychic, a little bit medium, if not a lot, but that was definitely not the norm back then. Um, so I kind of got two sides to it where I could see, okay, you can be very Catholic and have a deep faith, and you can know that there's more out there. There's more than what we can see with these two eyes. And so I feel very lucky that I had that experience growing up.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So, okay, um, because we have talked about other things on the show, I do want to jump right in to this topic of grief and like you have experienced so many
Mm-hmm.
deaths in your
Yes.
life, and your most recent one was your baby.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And and that's what you write about. And as you know, I went through the death of my husband, which
Mm-hmm.
was like out of the blue suicide. And
Mm-hmm.
so you and I, we come from, I think, with our backgrounds and what we do for our work, for our
Mm-hmm.
businesses, we understand death in a different way than maybe a lot of people do. And we process
Yes.
a little differently. So tell me, first of all, what inspired you to write the book? And then I guess take it wherever
Take
you
it
want
from
to
there.
go.
So that was kind of the reason that I wrote it. I knew that I view death in a very different way than most people do. I have had a lot of traumatic losses, as you talk about, and or as you mentioned, and so I go into 9 of those deaths, and they are not all of them that I've experienced, but they were the 9 that really propelled either my spiritual journey forward or gave me a different view of life, or just shifted how I viewed myself or my place in the world in some type of way, or taught me some type of skill, tool, practice, ritual, things like that. And I even go into a few of my animals, and then also death through birth. And when I mention death, I talk about it as the actual deaths, but also death of self, where we carry these old stories, we carry these old ideas about ourselves that really don't serve us at a certain point. And so each of those deaths also taught me what I needed to let go of in these old stories that were no longer serving me. So I go into my story with each person. I do start with our son that died in 2021, and then I go back to chronological order. So then I talk about my sister Claire and my grandmother, the one that I mentioned. I talk about my college boyfriend, my brother, an uncle, a cousin, and then I go into the death through birth and the animals. And I tell our story together and how they impacted my life, the lessons and the blessings, I call it, and then those death of self moments that came about, and then I get into the tools, the practices, and it's everything from meditation to psilocybin journeys. So I kind of take everybody on a pretty wild journey, not by my standards, but I think by society standards of where I went with all of my grief journeys and where it took me. And I just knew that my experience was very, very different than most people when they've lost so many significant people in their life. And I just wanted to share that, maybe to give hope, maybe make them not feel so alone. And you mentioned Skip, and my brother died by unexpected suicide when he was 20. And so I go into his life and his death and what that taught me. And that was really what started me back into my spiritual awakening. And that was way back, think it was 27 when that happened. And so it's really interesting to look back with 17 years of life experience since then. And I just wanted to share that with people of that possibility of, something beyond this, um, the possibility of our souls, the lessons we need to learn, and the experiences that we need to have, and where that can take us.
Yeah. So I guess let's start with Bodhi, with your
Mm-hmm.
baby, because
Yes.
I think without that happening, this book probably wouldn't have been born.
No. Mm-mm. No. Yeah, and that's the really interesting thing too to think about. My business, I wouldn't have a book, I wouldn't have a podcast, I wouldn't have traveled to and presented an international conference 2 years ago. There's so much that wouldn't have happened had he been here, because when I'm a mom, when I'm momming, I am all in on my momming. I don't leave the babies. We're nursing on demand, and I am all in on that. And it's not that I didn't want him to be here, but I can see from this perspective how it propelled me forward in helping even more people than I ever thought possible. And yeah, it's been, I kind of phrased it as the best of times and the worst of times. And I think that's something to mention about the book too, is this is not toxic positivity. This
Yeah.
is diving into the depths of grief, of despair, of not wanting to be here anymore either, of really feeling all of the feelings, really acknowledge all of them, and then what does the other side of that look like? And so this isn't a, yeah, I just think that there can be a real pitfall in this spiritual and metaphysical world of that toxic positivity, and this is not that.
Yeah, well, and even though I feel like, and I've been told that I processed my grief maybe a little quicker than
Hmm.
what some people thought I should still be mourning, right?
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
it's only just a little more than a year later. And it's not that I don't think about him or have, moments of missing him. But I did exactly what you said. I really let myself feel
Hmm.
all the feelings and go through those emotions. And I had support in that.
Yes.
So my best friend, she was my gatekeeper for 3 whole weeks afterwards, and she kept me in a happy or like a protective bubble away from
Hmm.
and their energy and their projections. And fortunately, I live here in Hawaii, and we went to the beach every day because that's very
Hmm.
healing. And I cried, I danced, I purged, I like did all the things.
Hmm.
And I knew, okay, I'm still here. I still have to live. I've
Yes.
got kids. I have a business. I have my community. There's so much to live for.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's the piece of it too, is when you allow all of that, it does seem maybe quicker to people who have pushed it down for days, weeks, months, years.
Hmm.
But it's going to come out in some way. And that's the other reason for this too, is in my business, I see a lot of people that have shoved all of the emotions down, whether it's grief or just other
Yeah.
difficult life situations, that then comes out in chronic pain, chronic
Hmm.
conditions, rage, anxiety, depression. And so I'm walking my walk that I talk, yeah, however that goes,
Yeah.
um, where I'm telling people they have to allow it, they have to process it. And so, that's what I embraced. And like you said, dancing, crying, screaming, all of the things, time in nature for sure was hugely healing for me and a big part of my grief process as well. I don't have the beach, but I have the mountains and the lakes and the moss and the big rocks. That's more what I have here. So,
Yeah. Well, okay. So, after Skip had passed, you and we both know a lot of psychic mediums.
mm-hmm,
And so he was willing and wanting to come through several of them within the first 6 months. And
mm-hmm.
in fact, right after the first week, I'm curious, Bodhi, has he come to you or through
Yes.
other people? And what have
Both.
been his messages?
Yes, great question. So both. I actually most recently at Thanksgiving, this year the holidays felt really difficult for me and really yucky. I've Matt, my husband, almost died in July. I had two aunts die this past year. I was just not feeling it at all. And so, of course, Thanksgiving is the start of the holiday
Mhm.
season, technically. And that night, I was asleep. My 9-year old had gotten in bed with us, which he doesn't do much anymore. And a little bit later, I had this sensation of another presence beside the bed. And of course, it just came to me, oh my gosh, it's Bodhi. And it was just a natural thing. He's would have been the 3-year-old size that he should be, and he just crawled. I felt his presence just settle into the crook of my arm, and it was just that wave of peace that washed over me. And that was the most recent. And oh my gosh, did I need that? But there's so many other ways that he shows up that's not like him being here, being present, and talking to me, which of course, I engage in that, but the signs, the symbols, the synchronicities that are just mind blowing. And very early on, I was doing I think it was a Sunday service, or maybe it was like a 1 day retreat with a friend of mine who is a reverend, and she did a meditation in this garden. And Bodhi came to me in that garden and showed me the vision of kind of weeping over his grave, but it was like a tunnel where if I was weeping over his grave, that was going to take me down a very long, dark tunnel. Or, he showed me if I turned around, the rainbow, the raindrops, the birds, the trees, where I could see him and feel his essence and all of those elements of nature. And that was another one of those moments that really turned the corner for me. And when you buy the book, there is actually a download to a meditation to meet a loved one in spirit that I wrote and recorded because that was so powerful for me. I really wanted to share that with as many people as possible.
Yeah, that's really incredible. And I mean, and it's such a good message because everything is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And within the first week of Skip's passing, he had come through my friend Lisa, and he said, and she was like, he says you're not going to want to hear this, but he says it's okay to be happier sooner than later,
Mm-hmm.
and to yeah to
Yeah.
continue on, because from that side, they're fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're better than fine.
Yes. They're way better off than we are. Yeah. And I think that in my experience with doing the past life regressions, so essentially every day I do at least one past life regression every day usually, and we go to that space in between lives.
Mhm.
And when they go back there, it is unconditional love. It is
Yeah.
peace. It is understanding for what they experienced. And it is so different than what we experience here. And the pain that we feel and the burden that we feel and all of those kinds of things, which are necessary because those are the human emotions that we need to
Mhm.
experience. But it's so much more than that. And I think that's the other piece that really helped me in this process is understanding that that's Skip's blip in his
Right.
soul's evolution. That's a blip in your soul's evolution. And same for me, for each person that I've loved and lost. It seems so much now, but in the entirety of my soul's existence, it is a small but significant piece.
Mhm.
And that I think has brought me a lot of peace over time too, understanding that.
Yeah. Well, and you and I, we do very similar work. We've got a lot
Mm-hmm.
of parallels. And
We
so
do.
I think what helped me process, like, again, maybe quicker or just easier perhaps, is understanding these multiple lives
Mm-hmm.
that we do live. We're more than just this one earth life, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is
Yeah.
just one of our many costumes. And so knowing that and knowing how connected I am to him soul
Mm-hmm.
wise, we've had multiple lifetimes together, and knowing that we're always connected at source, right?
Yeah.
All of us are connected. So what, I guess, with the other deaths that you've experienced, what kinds of information have they shared from the other side, or messages, or some of the blessings like you write
Mm-hmm.
about?
Yeah. Oh goodness. Let's see. So I think one of my when my college boyfriend died, that was when I really started understanding signs, symbols, and synchronicities. It was nothing I ever heard of, maybe like a sign from a loved one or something like that. But with his death, there were so many that happened, and I go into detail in all of them in the book. And he came through with plastic bowls and a song when I was leaving the mausoleum and a visit to give me a hug a couple months later. And so that was really what opened me up to those different possibilities. So even just being able to transform from the here and now and get
Mhm.
a little more expansive, because that was all the way. So I guess that was probably even the start of my spiritual awakening in 2002. And then, the few years later that my brother died. And there's just so many good messages. I don't even know what to where to go with that. I think, so talking about Mike, he really taught me to not care what other people think. He did
Mm.
not care at all. And that was something that he taught me in the way that he lived. And then that was something that I carried with me after his death. For my brother, he was the jokester. He was always making people laugh. And so within his life, he taught me how important laughter was. And in his death, I've remembered that too. And, through mediums and through meditation, my own meditations, him kind of giving me a hard time, even from the other side, it's like you still get that feeling and that remembrance of like, okay, yeah, it's good to laugh. We need to laugh. It changes our energy. And my uncle taught me about movement and how important that was. He was actually the reason I started running, which has snowballed into such a big part of my life. He taught me about Reiki. It's just mind blowing to me sitting in this point in 2020. Is it 2025 now?
Yeah.
Looking back over all of these, 43 years of my life and just seeing how one thing led to another to the next thing, and this thing that happened 11 years ago, that was when I met Sunny Dawn Johnston and Chris Volker. 11 years ago when I was pregnant, 12 years ago when I was pregnant with my middle son, and then how much having her in my life helped me understand the other side so much more too, and have
Mm.
more connection to the angels. And she was one of the first people that called me after I announced Bodhi's birth and death. And so that's what I would like to convey to people, is that we can make these seemingly small choices, but it can really add up and can make such a difference over time, and really trusting that process. Nothing is a mistake. Nothing happens by accident or coincidence. It is all, in my belief system, truly divinely guided, and there's a reason for everything that is happening.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, and when I was reading the chapter about your brother,
Mm-hmm.
um, Skip was also like very happy-go-lucky. Like he had, at least on the surface, he
Mm-hmm.
was. He Everyone loved him. He just made everyone feel joyful, and
Mm-hmm.
so but he was hiding deep depression. And so, was your brother also hiding some deep depression? I mean, I know
Yeah.
kind of the little thing of, what he wrote in the note about
Mm-hmm.
why he took his life, but
Yeah.
I'm curious.
I I don't know for sure. I think that knowing what I know about myself now and understanding myself better, I think he was really, really hard on himself in a
Mhm.
way that we didn't recognize, because he was the one that made everybody else feel better. He was the one that made everybody else feel special, the life of the party, everybody's best friend. And he genuinely was. It wasn't a put on. He truly loved and cared about people, but that not good enough, that failure just hit him so
Mm.
hard, and he made that choice, that knee jerk choice. And at 20, our brains aren't fully developed either, and we can't see how we can make it through these really tough situations. And I don't know for sure, but I obviously there was deeper emotions happening there that he wasn't sharing with us.
Yeah,
At least he could have been sharing it with other people, but not with us. So
yeah. Well, and I mean, as you write about, you went through your own feelings of like, should I leave?
mm-hmm.
And so,
Yes.
for you, what made you stay?
Yeah, I do write about not wanting to be here anymore. And that went way back, from little bitty. And I don't know, I've obviously analyzed this. When you write your life story, you analyze everything. And I think it was because I was just so connected to the other side, and that I know that life here is hard. It is struggles. It is these difficult life lessons that we can also see the beauty in. We can also see the blessings in. We can also still have the joy but it's not easy or simple or any of those things. So knowing that connection is over there and it's like just over there. And so just being tired on that soul level sometimes. And so I do write about when I really had severe postpartum anxiety, rage, and depression after my third child. And that was one of the times when I did become suicidal. And I don't know what honestly kept me here other than some weird, like, well, nobody's gonna be able to raise these kids like I am. And so even though I was like, I'm a terrible mother and what am I doing? I'm messing them up, I'm failing them. But on the other side, I was like, yeah, but nobody can do this as good as me. So it's this weird dichotomy that I had going on, thankfully, within
Mhm.
myself that made me realize, okay, we can do this, we can figure this out. And I got support nutritionally, I got support mentally and emotionally. So I reached out for help when I most needed it too. And that changed everything for me.
Okay, so that's a huge thing right there, is
Mm-hmm.
that like if anyone watching or listening is struggling, there's so many ways to get help and ask for that support if
Yes.
you really are compelled to still be here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes in the moment, the mind isn't working in
Mm-hmm.
a way that makes sense, but yeah, but there is always support out there.
Yes. And it doesn't have to be the traditional therapy
No.
psychiatrist route. There are so many options and avenues beyond that. And yes, that can be beneficial, but so much more that is out there and possible. And yes, if you, because I do think it's a choice. I do think some of us choose to exit at different
Mhm.
times for different reasons. But like you said, if you're compelled to be here, there are people that would love to help you through figuring that out for yourself.
Yeah. So, okay, so you have gone through all of this and you have grown, evolved, all of that. From this perspective now, 3 years later, I mean, you touched on it a little bit, but I would love to know, like, what you understand about your soul contract of what
Mm.
your purpose is here on
Mm-hmm.
earth, like why all of those experiences. What path are you here to walk now?
Yeah, great question. So I think that I partly was a conduit for both these soul contracts and path. One of the really interesting things that happened to both birth photographers. So we had two photographers because one had to leave and then the second one came in. They both were pregnant within the year after his
Mm.
death. And the one had a lot of issues and now her little boy is two ish. So it's just amazing. So I think that was part of his purpose for being here is raising the vibration, is allowing these, because I've met both of these babies and they are super duper special. You know, when you meet certain kids and you're just like, there's something extra special about this one. Both of them are like that. So was there a vibration that needed to raise? Was there a different level of consciousness that needed to be allowed? I don't know for sure, but I feel in my heart of hearts that that's a piece of it. And for me, I think it is offering my story to the world because it's just mine. This, I don't want to impose this on anybody else. This is not for me to prove my point or to insist on anything. This is simply to share my stories and my journeys, what I've learned along the way, what tools I've used, and offer it as a possibility for people. And so I think just sharing my story is my path. And I am a therapist by trade, and then I add in the human design and the past life regression and the clinical hypnotherapy and help other people process their traumas and their traumatic grief and the mind body issues
Mm.
and all kinds of things. And now I have a deeper understanding of child loss. I have a deeper understanding of the depths that people can go to at different times in their life. And if I had not lived all of these different experiences, I just wouldn't be the person that I am today. And the understanding that I carry about myself, my place in the world, and how that interacts with everybody around me, too.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and so do you live your life a little bit differently, understanding what death is?
Mhm. Very differently, I think. I don't
Okay.
know. I think that what it has done for me is I choose joy every day. So even if I have a bad day, I'm still getting glimmers of enjoyment, of pleasure, of silliness, of listening to my favorite song, of reaching out in connection. I make a conscious effort to connect with my children every day. Even I was so annoyed at my husband yesterday, and I still was like, okay, but like we have to figure this out and, deal with this instead of letting it fester or spiral into something worse. And I think before I did a lot of spiraling
Mm,
where one negative thing led into another negative thing that led into a crappy mood and a bad mindset, and just the spiral would happen. And now I catch that. Now I can pull myself back to no, no, no. That's not important. Okay, what was I thinking? What was I feeling? What shift or change do I need to make? And, make it almost instantaneously now instead of subscribing to some crappy story that I'm not good enough, or because you make a mistake, you're not, I am a failure. No, like I'm not doing that anymore. And so now I can catch that in the moment when something really difficult happens. I can almost see the why
mm,
almost immediately. And so, of course, that helps me live my life in such a different way than getting into that mindset of like, why did this happen? Oh my gosh, here's another thing. Not that those thoughts don't creep in, they do, but I can catch it and reel myself back in now too. Does that make sense?
yeah, it
Okay.
does. And also, I mean, so I want to go back to what you mentioned because you do touch on this in the book too of the death of self.
Mhm.
So, can you explain from your perspective what that might look like, what that means?
Yes. So, using Bodhi as an example, I am definitely a toxically independent person. I don't like to ask for help. I don't like to accept help. I will figure it out. Yeah. To my own detriment most
Yeah.
of the time. So that was one thing. I had to have help. I had a fourth degree tear during his birth, which involved many, many stitches and very horrific pain and kind of physical fallout from that. So I had to have help. I had to have help with the kids, with food, with going to the bathroom, with walking, with everything.
Mm,
We also needed help with these expenses that came out of nowhere that we were not anticipating. I had so much money set aside for maternity leave and midwifery care and these kinds of
mhm,
things, but not to pay hospital bills and an ambulance and all these other big expenses that came up.
yeah.
So people wanted to give us money. They wanted to bring us food, and I had to accept that and just say thank you. The other thing is I want to repay it. So I got to say thank you enough times, or I always had this feeling of that I owed them. And I realized that it was okay to say, okay, I can accept this. I can say thank you. I can be gracious, but that doesn't mean that I owe them something on the other side of this. They truly want to do this
Mhm.
for me, for Bodhi, for Matt, for our family, and I can accept that. And so that accepting help, being able to receive was a huge death of self, the death of self of the not accepting help. So that's one example, but I go into each death. I have one or multiple death of selves that I talk about within each death.
Okay. Well, and with all of that I've been through in my life, with relationships and careers and all that, yeah, when I was reading that, I was like, okay, yep, that was a death of self. That was a death of
Mm-hmm.
self. I mean, just even leaving academia and
Yes.
that that whole world basically died when I
Mm-hmm.
left, right?
Mm-hmm.
And all the people that were in that, it's like they were no longer part of this. So it was
Yeah. A
just like,
death. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
yeah.
And that's the one thing that Matt when he, after everything that he went through this summer, and he read the book after the fact, and he said all of this stuff applies to that health crisis too, because there were so many shifts that happen. Anything that is a big life change can institute and evoke these death of self moments, but essentially that letting go of old experiences, old
Mhm.
people, old parts of ourselves, old stories, all of those are what I kind of lump into that death of self stuff.
Yeah, well, and that's what I actually write a little bit about that in my newest book that just came out,
Yes, it's so
Awakening to
good.
Your, thank you, Awakening to Your Multidimensional Self, because in order for us to really shift to our highest and greatest timeline potential, we do have to be willing to let go of the old stories of the
Mm-hmm.
people that are not in the same vibration as us. And oftentimes we want to hang on tightly because we know it. And if someone does truly want to evolve, there are going to be certain people that can't hang with that energy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that was one thing that, um, and Sunny's one of my mentors, as you know, as
Mm-hmm.
well, and great friend. And um, one of the things that Skip kind of shared through her early on, which, I didn't know if I would ever talk about this, was that he didn't feel like energetically he could support me the way that he needed
Mm-hmm.
to in the physical, because I was really needing to fully expand into my full galacticness. And he was, even though he didn't quite understand it, like he understood a little bit, but not in the way that he,
That
in
you
order
needed
to,
him to.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was like, I can help you so much more from the other side now than I
Yeah.
could in the physical and energetically, because they see things from that higher perspective, right? That
Mm-hmm.
that's true. And so that's an extreme example of switching to a completely different timeline where someone's falling away.
Yeah.
But I do write about that in the book.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree with that. I've had that come up in sessions with other people too of okay, your grandma exited at this point because you needed that help from the other side. It was like you just said, in the physical, they couldn't do as much as they could on the other side. And that's hard for our human brains to wrap around, but because you and I operate in that other side and kind of come back and forth, I think we can kind of take that in a little bit more. But that makes perfect sense to me. Your grandma can't be with you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week in physical form, but she sure
Mhm.
can be in spirit form. So if you need that constant support, that was her way of doing that. And I've had that come through for other people as well, too.
Yeah. So I think for those watching and listening, it's just it can be very, yeah, sad, even like I had some anger, of
Mm-hmm.
course, as well, and all of that. And if you are willing to connect and understand, then there can be peace
Mm-hmm.
in the deaths that
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. And that's what I really want to offer to people is there can be the joy, there can be the peace, there can be this sacredness
Hmm.
in honoring this as a truly divine journey with each of the souls that cross our path, whether they are with us throughout our entire lifetime or whether they cross over at some point within our lifetime.
Yeah. So, okay. So what else regarding death or
Yeah.
grief or your business would you like to share?
Yeah, I think that one of the other things that Bodhi's death taught me was to put everything on the table. There was a lot of, there is stigma around galactic and psychic and medium and even human design, quite honestly, and sometimes even hypnosis, shockingly. But I just was like, whatever will help me feel and function my best. And so that was when I had already started researching psychedelics because I had already been doing a lot of trauma work with people. And there's a lot of research on the psychedelics. And so that was something that I had never really considered before. and then realized that that could be a really big, crucial part of my healing journey. And it does open us up very similar. Like, oh my gosh, I can't say that word. um, Similar to the meditations that really get you in touch with your galactic beings, the meditations and drumming and shamanic journeying that get you in touch with your spirit guides. It just opens up the brain in a different way to new possibilities, different possibilities. And
Mhm.
so that is something that I talk about in the book. A smidge. It's not a huge piece of it, but it did just open my consciousness and my expansiveness in a different way that could have come about, but it was just a way that it happened, I think, a little bit quicker for me too. So, and beyond that, just whatever it takes, being willing to do whatever it takes to feel better in those
Mhm.
deep, dark depths sometimes too.
Yeah. Well, so um, share with the audience how you like to work with people because you do offer a
Yes.
lot of different
I do.
things. So,
It all has a through line and a theme, and I'm a quad split in human design.
oh,
So I've come to
uh,
realize that I essentially have like these four pathways within my business, and I'm like, oh, isn't that interesting? So like I said, I have the masters in social work and am licensed as a therapist. And but what I do, so it can be those practical
mhm.
CBT, cognitive distortions, getting the coping skills in place, which I do think is important for doing the deeper work. And with the clinical hypnotherapy, we go into the subconscious. We go into those thoughts, feelings, stories that maybe we don't consciously understand or know why we're engaging in a behavior that we keep doing over and over that we don't like, but it's living in the subconscious. So the hypnosis allows that to come forward. The past lives are that expansive experience where we get to see what did we carry over, is there any forgiveness or healing that we need to do from the past lives to put that to rest, any clarity or insights that we need to bring back with us. The other piece is I do a lot of going back to reawaken gifts. So I get a lot of people who are wanting to tap into their own intuition and grow that side of themselves. So we go back to other lifetimes where they were healers in different ways and reawaken that. Um, and then I do the human design, and that I do strictly human design readings, but really I bring the human design into every session because then I can use the correct language that works best for the person in front of me, and I can help them understand themselves in a deeper way as well. So the sessions are usually to address a certain issue, whether that's physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. It can be chronic conditions that they want to get an answer to. And then I do the alchemizing grief. So when people have had difficult losses, usually there is a lot of forgiveness that needs to happen. There can be a lot of traumas beyond just the death itself. Things that people say, things that other people do, our own guilt, shame, regrets, whatever that may be. So I really help people move through that and connect with their loved one in spirit. And, obviously, not all relationships are good. So sometimes things are left unsaid. And so this gives them a chance to really connect and communicate on that soul to soul level. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I love that. Well, and not only do we have Sunny in common, but we have Kathy, our human design
Yes.
teacher, in common. So,
She is incredible. I just did a 6 hour karma clearing class with her on Saturday. Oh my gosh, it blew my mind. I love her so much.
yeah. So I'm just so happy that I was able to connect you guys.
Yes, me too. It's changed my life.
Yeah, well, and just touching on the human design just real quick, because that is one of your newer modalities.
Mm-hmm.
And it's now been, I guess, 10 or 11 years ago that I had my first reading with
Oh,
Kathy.
wow.
And and it completely changed the way that I operated in my life. And it
Mm-hmm.
allowed me to make these huge steps of starting a spiritual business, even though there was no reason
Mm-hmm.
really logically to do so, because I had my interior design business, to leave my toxic marriage,
Mm-hmm.
um, to move here to Hawaii, to fully step into my galacticness,
Yes.
like all the
Yes.
things, because I was following the way that my energy operates, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for you, what has human design and understanding yourself better allowed you to do?
Yeah. So I got my first reading 3 years ago. So I've been kind of self studying over this time. And then last year was when I did two 10-week courses and then a 4-week course with Kathy. And so it really allowed me kind of the same thing where it was like, no, you are a 5-1. You are meant to be a leader. I have a lot of leadership channels and I kind of push back against that sometimes. I am afraid of the criticism and the judgment when you put yourself out there because of the conditioning that I had. And so it allowed me to let go of that and really step into these pieces and just understand myself on a deeper level. And those, I love the shadow and the gift from the gene keys piece of it because that really allowed me to shed some of those old stories as well. And I do touch on that in the book where it really allowed me to step into my purpose once I understood that main sun sign and what that meant for me. And it is about sharing my stories. So
How
kind of
perfect.
perfect. Yeah, kind of perfect. And beyond that, it really helped me understand my husband because he's a manifester and they operate very differently in the world.
Yeah,
And
my son is a manifester.
oh,
And
yeah,
knowing that about him has allowed me to parent very differently.
so differently. Yes. And so my three living children, I have a two Manny Gens and a projector, and that understanding the projector piece, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, because I'm a four motor center generator. And so matched up with a projector, that does not go great. And so now that I understand that, I don't take it so personal. Like I took it as almost a personal affront. Like, you're not listening to me. You need so much downtime. Like, get it together. And now
Yeah.
I can be like, okay, your projectorness needs some removal from everybody else's energy. And that's
Yeah.
okay. And what can we do to support that? And all of my kids are on very individual paths. So they're 1-3s and they have a lot of individual circuitry. And understanding that allows me to say, okay, how do I support them in their individualness and those
Mhm.
journeys? Because I'm split between individual, tribal, and collective. So to
Okay.
me, in the shadow of it, they could seem very selfish. And that was kind of where I was starting to go. Like, why do these kids not care about other people? Well, they're not meant to. Yes, they are in some ways. And yes, they can be kind and empathetic and all of those things. But ultimately, they are here for a very individual journey and path. And so it is just that eye opening. Okay, you're just being you, and I don't need to place judgment on that or expect you to be different than who you're meant to be.
Yeah, I love that. I also have a lot of individual
Yes.
gates and channels. So, well, in our last little bit of time here, please share where people can find you, your website, what socials you're on.
Yes. So the book will be out on February 5th. You can order a copy now ahead of time that I will personally ship out. And then on February 5th, it will be on Kindle and through Amazon as well. And those first 3 days, it will be free. So 5th, 6th, and 7th. And it's going to be a self projected projector book. So that's why I picked February 5th as my launch date. So that's, yeah.
Okay.
So I know you can appreciate what that what that means. Um, so to find me, my website is Celebrate Every Step. My Instagram, my Facebook are all Celebrate Every Step. And I also have a podcast that is called Celebrate Every Step. And I would love to connect further in whatever way can serve you best.
Well, and I have had the opportunity to pre read the book, the
Mm.
advanced reader copy, and I'm so I loved everything that you wrote in it. It's truly incredible. It's going to help a lot of people. And so thank you for writing your stories, for sharing your
Thank you.
stories.
Thank you.
And
That means a
yeah,
lot. It was hard. It's hard to put it out there, I think, in some ways.
yeah, it can be. And so for those of you watching or listening, if you have any kind of deaths in your life, and you will at some point because everyone dies, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Yes.
this is a book that is a must read, I would say. So go and get a
Thank you.
copy.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And thank you for being here. And for those of you watching and listening, thank you as always. And I'll see you next time on Connection to the Cosmos. Aloha.